exciting presentation for all of you today. We have our partners from Silicon Valley Talent Partnership and Project Giving Kids who are going to give our presentation today. And on that note, I will pass it over to Ashley, who I think is going to start us off.
Yep.
Ashley.
Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I just wanted to go over some housekeeping before we get started. So I will ask that everyone, if you're not muted already, please mute yourself, although I think that is a function where we've sort of auto-muted everybody. But if you're going to be speaking, just make sure that you're off mute when you do. And please keep your video on if you can. If you're having bandwidth issues, of course, turn it off. But I think having the video on helps us to connect on a more personal level as best we can, since we're not together in person. And we're obviously sharing our screen of the slide deck, which we'll be sending out in a PDF after the webinar is over, along with an evaluation survey from SVCN and some takeaway materials that we wanted to share with you. I would recommend that you put the video in active speaker view from the slides. So on the top of your video window, there's a couple little box icons, and that second one in should say active speaker view. That way you can see who's speaking, but you're still able to see the slide as best you can. And then finally, since we have a good sized group, we're gonna ask for you to add all of your questions and comments in the chat box, which is going to be monitored by our colleague Floor. And she'll be sure to bring those into discussion as they come up, and also keep us all on track. So again, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat box, and for that we'll get going. So Jen, who you all just met at SVCN, she made the swift connection, an introduction between us at SVTP and Molly and Amy at Project Giving Kids, as we were both working together with her in these first 2 months of the crisis to engage nonprofits with volunteers in a variety of different ways. So we thank Jen for connecting us so that we could be here with you today. And I'm gonna actually start by letting Molly and Amy introduce themselves and their work with Project Giving Kids.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Yuska. I'm the founder of Project Giving Kids, which is a nonprofit that connects youth and families with age-appropriate community service opportunities at different nonprofits in the Bay Area, as well as in Los Angeles and Boston. Our whole purpose for being is really to help the young generation find ways that they can meaningfully engage. And so we use technology, primarily a website and a mobile app, to do that. And Amy is on the ground for us in the Bay Area, and she serves as our manager of youth engagement. So Amy, I don't know if you want to add anything else there?
Yeah, hi, I just wanted to say hello to everybody. I'm happy to be here. As Molly said, I am here in San Jose and work with PGK in a variety of capacities, but I lead our Youth Advisory Council, which is a group of young teens that help support PGK, and I do a lot of outreach to schools and youth organizations, just letting them know about the variety of nonprofits that are eager to get their support, and also working with young families in the area. So we're excited to be here today and try and provide some important resources for you.
Awesome, thanks. Flora and I are here from Silicon Valley Talent Partnership, which is an initiative of joint venture Silicon Valley, and it began in 2014. Traditionally, the Silicon Valley Talent Partnership matches teams of corporate pro bono volunteers to projects at nonprofits or public sector organizations. And we support that project through scoping, matching the teams, providing project management and evaluation. We also offer one-day sprint pro bono events, mentoring and consulting. But with the start of this health crisis, we shifted our focus to leverage these skills and our network to quickly match skilled volunteers to nonprofits and organizations that are affected by COVID-19. So I'm gonna just let Flor also jump in and introduce herself.
Yeah, hi. I'm happy to be here, and Ashley, you did a great introduction, so I don't think I have anything to add other than to say hi, and I hope this is going to be a helpful webinar for you.
Awesome. Thank Thank you. So as I said, we had sort of worked quickly in the first weeks of March to figure out how to partner and be of best service during the crisis. And we ended up partnering with Silicon Valley Community Nonprofit, Council of Nonprofits, sorry, and Silicon Valley Strong to work together to create a system for meeting needs of nonprofits and community organizations for volunteer support. So nonprofits are able to provide their needs through Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, which then comes either through Silicon Valley Strong or the SVTP, short for Silicon Valley Talent Partnership. And we are able to match and deploy volunteers, either boots on the ground on-site volunteers or skilled volunteers or virtual volunteers through that system. And we are lucky today. The team at Silicon Valley Strong has been doing a tremendous work deploying all of these volunteers to nonprofits, some of which are in the room, virtual room. And we have their talent on the call today. So I wanted to welcome Paul Pereira and Molly Tobias and Stephanie Jane from the city of San Jose, who have been amazing, deploying hundreds of thousands of volunteers on site and then allowing us to work with them and their database of volunteers to identify all of the skills to support all the nonprofits in that way as well. So they'll be able to contribute their experience with us during our discussion part of the webinar. And we're really glad and grateful that they are here. So like I said, a Silicon Valley Talent Partnership has been focused on matching the virtual volunteers, most of them skilled or experienced in a given profession or language. And if your organization needs volunteer support of any kind, please complete the form on SVCN's COVID-19 resources page. The link is there at the bottom of your slide. And if you have any questions, or if you are a food access or emergency services organization, please alert Jen via email so that she can help you out specifically. All right, so our goals today. Let me make sure I can see the chat too. All right, there we go. Perfect. Our goals today are simple. We want to help you out by providing real examples and ideas to provide some inspiration on different ways to utilize volunteers virtually, along with some best practices, and then send you on your way with resources and a plan of action. And we're going to start out that process by looking at challenges and opportunities. And we want to recognize that the many challenges that your organizations are facing during this crisis. But today we're going to focus just on 3 that directly affect your volunteer programs, and then offer opportunities that are emerging from those challenges that could help offset that. So the first challenge is that some nonprofit organizations have already reduced their own staff or furloughed them, and many have had their volunteer base drop off dramatically. In our work, we are also seeing a large number of volunteers whose work hours have been reduced, furloughed, or that are even newly unemployed. So skilled volunteering is a great opportunity for them to stay engaged in their profession and build their resume while also contributing to their community during a crisis. And I'm going to pass it off to Molly actually to share ways with you that other opportunities might arise.
So specific to the youth demographic, you know, one of the things that we're finding both within our organization and as a parent, you have a lot of people sitting at home with a lot of extra hours to fill. So youth engagement, you know, in terms of extracurriculars has dropped off. Schools, depending upon where the students are attending, may or may not even be filled. The hours may not be filled during the normal school day. And so we see an opportunity within that sector to really utilize this time. I think parents are hungry to find meaning meaningful ways for their kids to be occupied when they are not otherwise trying to still learn during this academic year. And there's no doubt that there'll be disruption into the summer as well. And so this captive audience of additional youth and families who are at home and very much looking forward to find ways to engage both within their community and to fill those hours, we think there's a great opportunity to pull that group into the mix as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about some creative strategies around how to do that. In terms of the next challenge that we have here, increased demand for services and necessary changes to the program delivery model, I think there are a number of organizations, as Ashley mentioned, that are reliant upon volunteers and have lost a good flow of their volunteer workforce. And so there are also people who have been fairly reliant on a face-to-face interaction with the clients and those that they serve who are now no longer able to be face-to-face. And so that's presenting undoubtedly a lot of challenges for all different types of organizations. But again, rather than focusing on the challenge, we think there are opportunities in this time. One of the things that we were talking about leading up to today that has been, I think, across the sector, very encouraging to see is just the amplified, level of networking that's going on in this crisis, and people really eager to communicate, collaborate, and some interesting sort of cross-sector partnerships that we're seeing from public to private to nonprofit, and the ability to really tap into that energy and to harness that toward fulfilling some of the challenges and the obstacles that we're facing in the short term, I think is a great thing that hopefully as we start to think about silver linings and all of this will continue after the crisis. And then also just the ability to engage populations online. Obviously, we think about changes in delivery model and some of the demand for services, and we think, oh, if we can't be together, that's going to be a deterrent. Whereas I think there are ways to engage online, even broader groups of people, greater numbers of people, because we don't have to now be face to face. And I think for us, when I think about the regions that we work in, they are so they're so dense in terms of population and traffic and those kinds of things. So really removing that friction of needing to physically be present can actually offer an opportunity to connect. And I think we had one more challenge, right?
Yep. All right, so the third challenge we want to acknowledge is related to technology, which is a lot of what's going to come out today when we talk about engaging volunteers virtually, and that's the increased reliance on technology and the lack of systems or resources to support it. This is actually, although a huge challenge, an excellent opportunity for skilled volunteer support to match individual volunteers who have these tech skills to come in and do things like design a new web portal or web page for a program that you're newly implementing with regard to the crisis, or to start or manage some databases to help manage an increased volume of clients or donations. And we're also seeing entirely new organizations pop up during this time from the corporate sector primarily, where there are networks of tech professionals that are specifically wanting to support nonprofits, public sector, and small business. And that's everything from implementing and training staff on totally new technology, all the way to, helping support smaller IT needs. And there's quite a few of them. So we're actually going to share these towards the end of the webinar when we talk about, a list of resources for all of you to take home with you. All right.
Great. Molly, we were going to share some examples.
Yes,
from the field.
We are. And despite retreating to my corner, I have someone banging on my door. So I'll apologize now for any noise in the background on my side as we talk about this. Me too. Amy, do you want to jump in here really quickly, and I will be right back with you. I apologize, everyone.
Sure. So with Project Giving Kids, as Molly mentioned at the beginning, we partner with a variety of nonprofits in Boston, LA, and here in the Bay Area. And we recently, prior to actually COVID-19, sent out a survey to all of our partners, just trying to, assess how they were using PGK, what some of their successes were, what some of their challenges were. And just as those discussions evolved, throughout, the shelter in place, we started to get a lot of examples from them as to how they were engaging their volunteer base and engaging their support, their supporters in their work prior to COVID-19, and then as things were changing. And so we have just a few examples to share today. The first being PATH, which is one of our partners based here in California, and we have a partnership with the Los Angeles region, but also growing one here in the Bay Area. And Molly, do you want to talk a little bit about the changes that they made recently?
Yes, I think this is a great example, probably one of the best examples that I've seen just in terms of mobilizing people in this crisis. They have really taken to trying to figure out both how they can leverage existing followers but build new followers online, particularly right now. They've been doing a weekly Tuesday afternoon session where they're trying to mobilize people on social media to get them to share out their hashtag, to really educate around the issue of homelessness, how PATH specifically is addressing that. And they've been doing that week by week. I know this afternoon they have a virtual volunteering training session where they're going to be talking about all the ways people can help during COVID. So it's a really great example of how they've gone online. And I think as we think about it from our demographic, it's a great way to engage teens. It's a great way to engage adults. But that whole social media piece is a very, very easy and active one, I think, for people to build around. Gaining ground. Amy, did you mention this one while I was gone?
No. I just kind of given the context.
Okay. Gaining ground is another one. It's a small organic farm in Boston, not dissimilar, I think, though, to a lot of different regions that have a comparable kind of organization. But they had a very localized school readathon that they were utilizing and going physically into different schools to talk about their work, to get kids actively engaged. And with this pivot, obviously kids are no longer in school, and they've really figured out how to move that online. And now they're getting kids from around the country involved, whereas it was a very local kind of on the ground movement up until this point. So they're actually getting more awareness beyond that immediate community and getting more kids engaged, hopefully throughout the course of their session this spring, which will go right into the planting that they do. And then from there, they service a number of service agencies, providing fresh organic produce to the clients that they serve. Another one that we really liked, 826 Boston. There are several 826 chapters around the country. But again, they were looking to figuring out how they could leverage social media and get kids engaged, because they work with youth in creating videos. And so they got a funder to tie a donation for every time a hashtag was used. And these kids had, I want to say it was like 8 seconds to carry like books on their head and then tag 6 friends. I mean, it was really short, quick, and all tied to their 826 name. And so a very creative way, again, to just get more people talking about them online and engaged in the work, and also to get some funding associated with it as well. And then another partner, just again to add some diversity to this, Project Bread, which is one of the largest hunger relief organizations in Massachusetts, hosts many thousands of walker event every spring. It's always in May. That obviously was not going to be able to happen this year. And so they decided to pivot, make it a virtual walk, and really decided to make it timely and focus on hunger relief in the COVID crisis. And so again, rather than just saying, okay, we're going to take our walk and move it online, they really tried to sort of use the momentum of the current climate and what's going on to bring some extra relevance to that virtual walk. So for all of these, these are new ideas that are being tested. I think some of them have a lot of opportunity and promise. A little early to tell for sure if we will call them success stories or not, but these were just 4 of the ones that we thought really had some opportunity to get people thinking. And then just a quick extra note on that. The other thing I would say is we see a lot of organizations looking for other ways to just leverage kids during this time, and again, to give them something useful to do. So we have had partners telling us, we'd love to have more cards in or bags that are decorated to go out with meals. We've had some that have mobilized around the whole mask issue, a partner that just asked us for masks asked us to post something about masks in Boston for the homeless women that they work with. Found out this morning they had a whole delivery of them that were made in the last day or so. So just lots of ways to really look and to get kids moving, get them active, and probably most importantly, learn about their organization. I think part of what we talk about all the time is that engaging kids and families and understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then educating them over time with all the different ways they can get involved with your organization and in support of your mission is a huge opportunity. And I think, again, there are a lot of people checking emails, there are a lot of people looking for opportunities right now, that it's a really, really great time to just build awareness and build ambassadors for the work that you're doing in the community.
Awesome. I love those ideas. Ours, we're going to talk about some examples we've seen from the field around skilled volunteering, and we've already seen some organizations pivot really quickly or pivot in unique ways. So I'm going to talk about just 3 of them that stood out to us, and also offer some different perspectives. The first one is the College of Adaptive Arts here in San Jose. It is a theater arts college for young adults and adults with disabilities. And in the shelter-in-place time, all of their students were forced to go online, and a lot of their families didn't have the tech equipment or skills or internet access to make that possible. So we began working with them pretty early on to identify their equipment needs and connected them with an organization called the Tech Exchange to access some donated equipment, and then with devices for students and human IT who were able to provide internet access to families who did not have it. And now that the technology is actually just in place this week, towards the end of last week, they are now looking for support for those. There's actually 8 families that need a lot of support over the phone to install the equipment, upload all the necessary programs, and training around how to use them. And some of those need to be in Spanish. So we're matching them to volunteers from our database that we share with Silicon Valley Strong, in addition to volunteers from an organization that has emerged in the last month or 2 called Tech Cares, out of a company called Adaptive Security. So although looks like it's a conglomeration of 4 or 5 different organizations to meet the needs of this particular group, I think it's a really great example of how everyone kind of came together to use their skills and resources to support them. Speaking of Tech Exchange, I think in working with them, they were extremely overwhelmed, especially in the early days of the crisis, with requests for equipment from all sorts of different directions around the Bay Area, and as well as donations from companies who are trying to contribute what they could in unused equipment. And so they needed a database or spreadsheet whiz to help them develop and populate a system to better track all of their equipment and requests. And then lastly, Nourish Stockton is a program, a brand new program out of the city of Stockton that is around food distribution, similar to what the city of San Jose and other cities are doing to try to get meals and food out to their population in the city that needs it or is homebound. And because it's a totally brand new program, they wanted to get the word out as quickly as possible. And so we matched them with a graphic designer that helped them create all new digital marketing collateral to support their efforts. And they know that this is a short-term project and that resources are better spent elsewhere. So they turn to pro bono help rather than paying a contractor or hiring new staff. So those are some examples, and we're going to take that and jump into summarizing best practices. Some of them you can see in the examples we shared, and some of them we'll cover in a little bit later in our discussion. So we're going to start with the importance of scoping and packaging your project for whatever volunteers you might have, whether that's a skilled volunteer or putting it out to groups of youth over social media. It's essential for skilled volunteers, and similarly important for any group of volunteers, that the project is clear to understand and it's clear deliverable at the end. So that's essential for a variety of reasons, one of which is these volunteers are not on site to ask questions. So the more that you can upfront make this project as clear as possible, then you won't have the belaboring task of screening a ton of emails and questions from people about what exactly it is that you're hoping that they help you out with. The second one is around communication. Like I just said, a clear chain of communication for volunteers is essential to reduce confusion and streamline the work. And then every project has multiple touch points. So every project has a start and a kickoff and multiple check-ins, hopefully throughout, to make sure that the volunteers have what they need, keeps them on track, also makes them feel like a valuable part of the organization. And then closing out the project or celebrating its completion is an opportunity to share your gratitude, offer additional engagement with your organization, and sort of closes the loop and hopefully keeps them coming back again. And I'm going to actually pass it off to Molly to talk about mission engagement and then any other perspective that PGK might have around any other best practices that I mentioned.
Okay, well,
hold on, I'm sorry. I wanted to, we didn't really go over, did you want me to go over the communication slide? Sorry.
I was still on best practices.
Okay.
Going backwards, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, apologize.
There we go. No, it's okay. Do you guys have anything you want to share about best practices in summary before we jump into them one at a time?
no, I think jumping in would be great. And we'll kind of fill in around the edges there.
I think the goal, when we talk about best practices and mission engagement, is just, making sure that while you're utilizing your volunteers, you are, continuing to find new and creative ways to keep them engaged, in the work that they're doing and in your mission, just to keep things moving forward. So we'll dive in a little bit further. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
The slides. All right, let's go. Okay.
All right. So as I mentioned, scoping is an essential part of, especially when you're engaging a skilled volunteer or a team of skilled volunteers. And we at SVTP often refer to scope development as the most important piece of the puzzle. And when we help organizations scope a larger project, we ask many, many questions to help narrow and define that scope, which gives that volunteer team or an individual volunteer clear direction. It gives them boundaries. So if you send them off to start researching something, they don't end off out in the woods. It defines the deliverable that's expected at the end of the project and a timeline for that project. We also typically provide a background to the issue when we scope a project and a summary of the impact that that project will have. And although your projects might not engage a team or require such a formal scoping process, it's still very important to define the specific scope of work for an individual skilled volunteer. Again, it just clears those lines of communication. It makes everything clear, and the deliverable will end up being something that is really valuable to your organization. And we're going to provide you with planning worksheets at the end of this webinar for you to take back to your organizations that will help you begin that process as well.
And just to jump in there, Ashley, from the youth and family side of things, I think
Please.
Similar to what you're saying, defining that scope is important. While it looks different for youth and families, I would say it's equally important to make sure that it's very clear what you're asking them to do. And I think for children, also defining for them why it matters to your organization is another really important piece of that. I think for kids, the connection between what they're doing and why they're doing it is not as apparent perhaps as it is for a skilled volunteer, but very important in terms of the overall experience of that volunteer and that family and their desire to stay connected to your organization moving forward. So to the extent that it needs to be clear both for execution but also for the sake of understanding, I think is very, very important when you're talking about youth and families. I think the other thing that I would say as well, the more positive that first experience, the greater the chance for another one. And so bringing families, youth and families along that line of natural progression in a volunteer experience from something that might be a quick one-off that, gets them to know about your organization, but leads them down that path of more reoccurring or deeper opportunity as a volunteer is something that I encourage everybody to think about. How can I kind of bring them along that continuum or along that natural trajectory so they want to stay involved and become more deeply involved in your mission moving forward.
move on to communication.
So we had fun talking about this one a little bit, because I think one of the things that's become apparent, and probably to all of you as well in the last 2 months, is just how much is out there, right, in order to really leverage technology to communicate virtually. I was telling the story to someone the other day that I have a group that usually meets by Zoom, and for whatever reason, for as long as I can remember, I was like the only one who would turn their video on. And then all of a sudden that group got together the other day and everyone's video was on. And I think it's because as a group, as a culture, we've already had to embrace that we have to turn our video on. People have to see us with our bad hair days, because that's the only way we're seeing each other now. And so I think as this continues to go on, however long that may last, people are going to be increasingly ready, I think, to embrace technology. And there really is so much out there that can be leveraged for the sake of communication, whether that be individual communication with staff or with volunteers or with larger groups. And so this list is by no means exhaustive, but we wanted to come up and offer at least a few different ways, whether that be, again, through instant messaging channels like Slack channels or WhatsApp groups. There are closed groups. Probably many of you use some kind of a volunteer system where you can pump messages out to your volunteers through those systems. Facebook groups was another one that we were talking about. And then traditional, I think what many organizations have already leveraged well, traditional email and newsletters. We also think, particularly for the young demographic, the whole video connection, leveraging of social media obviously offers a lot of merit and a lot of consideration. That's the kind of content that they are used to consuming, that they want to consume. So whether that's through IGTV on Instagram, Facebook live feeds, those kinds of things, depending upon, again, the social media profile of your organization, you might want to think about tapping into those perhaps a little bit more than maybe historically you have, or depending upon who you're trying to connect with, look into utilizing those. And I think, we were talking too, and I think this is something at our organization that we're talking about using a little bit more frequently with different groups, but just having a time when people can dial in to learn about your organization through a Google Hangout or a Zoom session where, you are just sharing the updates that may be going on, whether in relationship to the crisis and needs that you may be having as a result of that, or just even as a means by which to get people more knowledgeable about your organization, and then asking those who are already connected to keep growing the circle and expanding into some new populations that maybe you haven't connected with before. Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
Well, I just wanted to add, I know that there's so many resources out there. Perhaps if there's anybody in this webinar that wants to use the chat, if there's any tools that are working really well for you and your organization, if you want to share those in the chat, we might be able to share those out later, with our resources, because we definitely did not cover, all the amazing resources that are available.
Yeah, I think this is such a great list of platforms and offers great connections. The only thing that I would offer, which isn't on there, but I think all of us use already anyway, which is what Flora and I generally use with so many of our teams, pro bono teams, is the Google Docs platform, where, for larger projects and whatnot, everyone has access and can share their work through that platform. And that's been really helpful for us before this crisis, but I think we're using it even more now.
Yeah, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Google.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to take the next slide. I'm just talking a little bit about mission engagement, just as it relates to being a best practice. And obviously best practices are best practices, regardless of a pandemic or not. But I think when you think about mission engagement, I think about, we're all in this amazing work, right? Nonprofit work, because we enjoy helping people and we enjoy helping the community, and it feels important and it also feels good. And I think that that's something that we need to hold on to during these difficult times of, how do you make your volunteers feel good? How do you keep them getting those warm fuzzies that come from the amazing work that you're doing? And so just, some reminders, because sometimes these things get lost in the shuffle of just, keeping that regular communication with your volunteer base, doing acknowledgements. And this is something that can appear in a variety of ways. I know my mom actually works for a nonprofit back in Texas, and she's constantly doing like the handwritten thank you notes, which nobody does anymore. And that's a wonderful task. That's something that takes her a lot of time that could be offset, to perhaps a volunteer. But, you know, whether those are personal thank you notes, whether they are shout outs in your newsletter or things that get posted on social media, just a little highlight, you know, of a volunteer that did great work. Keeping people inspired and motivated to continue, you know, being your advocate, doing that by sharing client stories, visuals of people, you know, being helped and the community being improved, you know, just basically showing your mission in action and showing that impact. A lot of people love the swag. I don't know, it's kind of that, some people love it, some people have enough of it, but it's definitely something to think about. You know, you can definitely use some of those items to invigorate your volunteers, particularly if they are about to embark on a big project. You know, you send out that scoping package and you give them a little, you know, little swag to get them through, or perhaps at the end to celebrate. And one piece that I feel like is very important, and this comes from my background teaching, is giving your volunteers some time or structure or prompts to really reflect upon the work that they've done and think about how it's meaningful and how it's making a difference in your bottom line. And that could just be, you know, sending out, you know, little prompts of things to think about and asking them to reply back. You know, their replies could become, you know, great marketing materials or social media posts. And then also providing some information on how people can take their education forward. So, you know, obviously your volunteers are gonna be learning about your cause and learning about your work, but, you know, how can they then take the next, what can you provide them basically to take that learning to the next level? So I think that that's a really great way to keep people engaged. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add. I know we're trying to stay on a timeline. All right.
No, it's great. And we're on time.
Okay, super. Let's go ahead and go ahead, Ashley. I'll pass it off to you to kind of. Yeah.
So this, you know, this is our favorite time. We want to hear from you, and to kick us off, to open up discussion, I have asked Minnie Sage from TaxAid to share with us, and I pinged her in advance to answer some questions and to get us presenters thinking about how we might answer it. But I'm hoping that members from the group will jump in as well. This, I think, is a pretty large group, so jump in to support, you know, kicking this off. The two questions that I asked Minnie were, please tell us one thing that's really worked well for TaxAid with regard to engaging volunteers virtually, and also one challenge that they're having with regarding to engaging volunteers remotely as well, that remains for them. And so as a team, we'll collectively try to brainstorm ways to meet that challenge. So if Minnie is ready to jump in, are you there?
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Minnie.
Hi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So what's one thing that's working well?
Okay. So just a quick little background. TaxAid is a nonprofit, and we prepare tax returns for those who make under $55,000 a year. So yes, we've had to shift completely. One thing, so it's very unfortunate that we're all in this situation. However, I would say that one thing that's worked really well for us, and our volunteers and clients, is that we have the technology available at this time and point. Had this happened 5 years ago, perhaps people would not have been as comfortable with the technologies that is out there. You know, now we have Zoom. We're all able to speak with each other via Zoom. And, you know, we have found that we've been able to do the same with our clients. We're able to do virtual returns with our clients at this time. So yeah, so technology has worked well for us.
Awesome. All right. So how about one challenge that you continue to have facing you during this time?
So we have a large number of volunteers who help us prepare returns. And for many of our volunteers, it's a very, volunteering is a very social experience. So we have teams of volunteers that, you know, meet outside of the volunteering experience. So being that we're all within our homes, it makes it a little bit challenging to keep that social component active.
Awesome. So any other presenters want to take a first stab at that challenge? Anyone? I wrote some ideas down, but I'm throwing it out there.
I can see how that's a challenge because so much of volunteering, you know, is that social interaction, and that's a testament to you, Minnie, and how you've, you know, brought people together to do the work. That's something that they miss and they're craving. But it's just going to require some creativity, right, of how we can.
Yeah. One of the.
Oh, we have an idea.
Hi, this is Grace Sonia. I'm with AARP California. So nice to see our tax aid cousins here on this webinar. So one of the things that, so at AARP California, we have an office in San Jose. We just activated our community education and events teams. We just opened an office last year, so we're a relatively new presence, and our volunteers are new to us. So just after we convened them and got everybody trained, shelter in place descended upon all of us, and what I was able to do soon after that was convene a call with all of them to ask them about how they wanted to stay in touch with each other, because Minnie, you're absolutely right. The magic that happens with the relationships that they forge, it really is a social, volunteering is a social event for them. So they actually told me that they wanted to meet over the phone once a week. And so we meet every Wednesday. We alternate between an agenda that's centered around updates with AARP, and give them time to do information sharing around what they're hearing in the community. A popular topic for them is actually sharing senior grocery shopping hours, and those keep changing, so they like keeping each other updated on that. Some other virtual volunteer opportunities that they're currently doing. So yeah, they actually told me they want to meet once a week. One of the challenges though is technology. So these types of Zoom calls, some of them have adopted this technology. Some of them really want to stay away from it. So we just do a conference call, and it is challenging at times because they're all, speaking on top of each other, but that just adds to the fun and excitement too. So yes, all of that to say, they told me what they wanted, and what they wanted was to be able to meet once a week, at least over the phone. And I didn't think that they would hang in there for as long as they have. I figured that they'd get really bored, but they haven't. I've had a great group of 15 to 20 people every Wednesday morning. So thanks for letting me share that.
That's great. That's a really that's a good, happy story. It warms my heart to think about them all talking over each other.
And I think that brings up a really good point, though, if I can just interject. I think that the best way, may vary wildly, right, between the demographics of the volunteers that you're talking about, right? So in that instance, the traditional phone call may be as technology, savvy as you're going to get. Whereas if you're dealing with teen volunteers or some of the others that are very used to that instant messaging, something like Slack, something like a WhatsApp group, whatever, probably plays a whole lot better because they don't pick up the phone, right? I wish my 15-year-old called people. He's like, why would I call them? I'm like, why wouldn't you call them? So I think thinking about that too, kind of in those individual buckets of, are these volunteers of the same age and demographic, and this will work. I think it gets even trickier when you're talking about volunteers that span, a wider array of people. But
yeah. Do we have any questions in the chat that we?
Yes, we have a couple.
Okay.
So somebody's actually asked right before we got somebody to speak up, have we tried or has somebody tried scheduling Zoom volunteer hours, which we just got a great example of. So
Yeah.
there's your example. I guess it can work depending on what the need is and what the work looks like. The other question we had was from Nick Arnett, which was, do you see any greater than normal need to offer emotional or spiritual support to your volunteers? And if so, how do you see accomplishing that? So I don't know if Amy or Molly wants to speak to that, or if somebody else on the call wants to speak up. If you do, please unmute your microphone and then say what you have to say. We'd love to hear from you.
I'm from Spirit Care Ministry to Seniors, where we do offer spiritual and emotional support to both our volunteers. We have about 20 pianists, the oldest of which are in their 90s. I set up Salesforce, and for the first time we've been using the Salesforce lists to send information to them. I personally don't like using the phone, even though I'm a senior, but I did call them. They were incredibly grateful for emotional support. We have 2 paid pastors, and we started a blog. We emailed all the activity directors in the 66 care homes we go to, because whereas people are thinking of the residents in the care homes, actually the carers are under incredible stress. Many of them do have a faith-based background and need spiritual help. And so we have been providing them music online. Some have asked for face masks. We have volunteers, but we need more. We need elder volunteers who can go. We've been working with another organization that deals with lonely seniors in San Mateo County. And one of the volunteers who spoke to a senior on the phone for an hour, the senior had been praying for 2 weeks for someone to contact her. And the volunteer just broke down into tears. So yeah, there has been an increase in spiritual need.
It's interesting. Thank you. Any other organizations have a similar experience that want to share? No? Any other questions, Flor?
Well, actually, Angela also posted a question there, which is sort of piggybacks on what she was just saying, which is whether we know of organizations that have a pool of senior volunteers that could serve care homes online for spirit care ministry to seniors. I'm thinking maybe that could be an area actually where we might be able to see if we could help. So Angela, happy to talk more offline afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just send email info@spiritc.org. You could put spiritcareministry.org. We also have the domain just spiritc.org. Just send info@spiritc with the letter C, spiritc.org. Anyone who can help.
Okay.
All right. Well, if anyone in this group wants to help and step up, you've got the email, and if not, we'll see what we can do. So let's see. Question from Patricia Krakow. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not butchering your last name. Who's interested to know of how nonprofits might best engage skilled seniors who are unable to be out in the community. Do you want to take that one, Ashley?
Sure. We've had a couple of different conversations with people about utilizing seniors, and one of the biggest things that tends to come up is the phone, right? Engaging seniors and calling other seniors, or even just doing client outreach of any kind for your nonprofit organization, no matter what the mission is. That is something that I have seen in our experience thus far as something that seniors are interested in doing. It also gives them a sense of connection as well. I'm trying to think of some of the people that we've had as skilled volunteers are retired professionals who are seniors, but because they have that professional skill, they're still very much able to offer that a few hours a week, especially if it's a language skill that is needed for translation. And those are the ones that come to mind off the top of my head. Please, Molly or anyone else, feel free to jump in.
I will say not so much in Silicon Valley, but we do have some need for Hispanic speakers who can translate and could also translate our website. In Silicon Valley, so that's spiritcareministry.org, but in the city, we have need for Chinese speakers, translators as well.
Excellent. I'm going to move us on. I think we could have a whole webinar just of discussion probably, and I think that would be really useful. So in your evaluations, if you think that this is a topic that you'd like to dig further into to answer more questions about volunteering during this time, I also saw a question in the chat about transitioning back to normal and how that's going to work with different volunteer programs. And so if this is something that you'd like to see more of through SVCN, definitely put that in your evaluation, and we can make make sure that SVCN sees that and doing more in this area moving forward. So before we go, however, and we close up, we wanted to talk about resources for all of you to, hopefully maybe even answer some of the questions that you have already had. And sorry, it's small font. Again, you're going to get these slides emailed to you, so you'll have these links. No need to frantically write them down. But obviously, Project Giving Kids is an excellent resource for anyone who's able to involve youth and families in their work. Project Giving Kids does such an excellent job of pairing that with a lot of education and reflection on their website, and also just in helping nonprofits understand how to deploy youth as volunteers. And then of course, Flora and I are here to help with any skilled volunteer needs that anyone might have, from anything from as simple as a specific language, someone to do client outreach, all the way to, what we were talking about this morning, Flora, which is supply chain management professionals. So definitely reach out to us. Molly or Amy, do you guys want to talk about all of the volunteer match, Just Serve, All for Good? Have you had experience with those?
Yeah, personally, yeah, I should distinguish a lot of those platforms, tend to cater to, more of an adult, not exclusively, but an adult population of volunteers, but can be amazingly great resources. I've played around with them just in our different regions, in both where I am on the East Coast, and, there are varying degrees of content depending upon geography. So I can't speak specifically to Silicon Valley and the depth of that, but they're a great place to post, things that you have coming up. Ours is very specific, as Ashley said, to youth and families and to teens that you might want to engage. But I think there are a number of platforms, these only being some of them, where I think it's worthwhile, if you have the bandwidth from a staffing perspective, to post these across multiple platforms. So there may be some historical organizational experience with those, but obviously it takes time to put your listings up. But all of those can be a great source. I think, volume-wise, Volunteer Match is probably above and beyond the other ones that are listed, just in terms of the number of organizations listing there.
Yes, that is a good point. Volunteer Match definitely does sort of own the market a bit. Right underneath that, you'll see Taproot Plus and Catch-A-Fire. Those are both online platforms for skilled and pro bono volunteering. It is very similar to Volunteer Match for skilled professionals. So those are good resources to go for a one-off individual volunteer. But again, if it is something that is local, Flora and I can help you as well. And then for technology, there is a ton, a variety of resources that have come up in the last month and a half. And these are just 5 of the ones that I tend to hear about the most. So there definitely could be more. Tech Cares, I mentioned earlier, they are an organization that has over 100 corporate professionals that are ready to be deployed to help nonprofits implement or train on different platforms that you haven't necessarily used before. All of these are free. US Digital Response is specifically looking at civic projects and public sector projects. They will work with nonprofits if it's a nonprofit public partnership. So for example, we reference them to United Way and the 211 hotline early on in the crisis. Varsity Technologies is another one that is there to support, sorry, now I'm getting them all confused. Let me pull up my notes. Varsity Technologies is network management, security services, wireless deployments, backups, and data management. Also supporting nonprofits and how to use Microsoft Teams. Then TechSoup, I'm not as familiar with, but they do, again, it's very similar. A lot of those pro bono implementation services. Salesforce for nonprofits is doing a lot of pro bono support and also offering its products pro bono to nonprofits right now. And obviously SVCN is a huge resource. We don't have them listed here, but we all know that they're a huge resource to all of us. And then just this morning, it was pointed out to me that there is a website out of the governor's office called Californians for All. And that is a volunteer platform amongst other things, that program, but they have a portion of it that's a volunteer platform where you can submit, people are applying to volunteer there. So there's definitely a database building. I'm not entirely sure how to access it, but I wanted to bring it up. And then if anyone has any resources that have been extremely helpful for you during this time, please include them in the chat if they're not listed here so that we can have a great list. And then let's hit up the takeaway plans. Amy, you want to talk about these?
I'll take a stab at it. So as Ashley mentioned, one of our goals is really for you to be able to go back to your organizations and do something with this information that we've shared, and how do you put these best practices, you know, into action during this crazy time. So we created two little tools, like worksheet type things, one focused on youth, families, and individuals, and one focused on skilled volunteers. And the idea is that you just take a few minutes to think through an existing volunteer project that you might want to revamp to better suit a virtual volunteer, or perhaps you want to take time to think about a challenge that you're facing and kind of walk through various considerations to where you can address that challenge using volunteers in this new time. So these are just little screenshots of the documents that we will be sending out after the webinar. But again, it's just sort of a tool to help you walk through your thinking, keeping in mind those best practices of scoping, communication, and mission engagement.
Yep, exactly. Same with the skilled volunteer one. These are both 2 pages front and back. So these are just screenshots, but something for you to take back to your organizations and use to structure a conversation or a brainstorming around what your organization might be able to do to engage more volunteers.
And I think I just want to say with this, when we talked about scoping and packaging, it does take a little bit of time, but I think we are in a period right now where the time and effort that you're putting in on the front end of these projects, you're going to reap the rewards at the end. I come from a hardware background, and it's that whole measure twice, cut once type thing. So, you know, I do feel like walking through this, you know, brainstorm is really going to be a great use of time, and will help you in the end.
Awesome. All right. Well, we wanted to thank you for coming today and taking time out of your sunshiny Friday that we have today. And please feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions, or if you are looking for our support. We hope that the examples we provided with the slides and the discussion today have been helpful to spark new ideas, or to bring back you know, thoughts you might have had in the past and think about how to switch them to something remote, and that our takeaway planners can turn those ideas into a reality for you sometime soon. So I think I'm going to pass it off to Jen to talk about closing out and evaluation, but thank you very much for being with us. This was fun.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you to all of you, Amy, Molly, Floor. I hope that each of you who participated got something out of the workshop today. Just a reminder, I'm going to send a thank you email that will include all of the documents that these teams want to share with you, and I will include a link to a Survey Monkey where I would love for all of you to click and fill out an evaluation to let me know how you think the workshop went, and let me know what other training topics you would like to see in the future. So on that note, let us know if you have any questions. I'll include all of our workshop presenters in the email so you can reach out to them directly, and you can always reach out to me at jennnt@svcn.org. We hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.